she was probably one of the strongest characters around in her particular era. She had more on the ball than almost any other girl singers. You see, this is the interesting thing to me about Alma. You had to go to Alma to find out anything you wanted to know. She never went to anybody else to find out. She worked it out for herself. Those eyes, those big brown eyes, would look right through you and would pull you apart and put you together again while they're looking at you.
The giggly girl singer and the dresses were the television image. I mean, she never wore those dresses outside her show. She had the same infectious, amusing, giggling personality, but every line was not dizzy at all. It was based on a great deal of thought and study of everything. I would say most people wouldn't have known that she could be a very hard businesswoman.
She would arrange to have lunch with, to have dinner with, to be at any function where she knew a personality was going to get the press would be there. She would be with them. And when there were any pictures to be taken, she would be there.
Charlie Drake's first film, Sands of the Desert, is launched at a star-studded world premiere in Blackpool. Here's Alma Cogan with Pearl Carr and Teddy Johnson.
Stars among the guests included Harry Fowler and Andrew Ray. Alma Cogan was another.
You, me, and us, we are my favorite people. We all go together like peaches and cream, or bells with a church and a steeple. Some people I know I'm fond of, and so all day I keep singing about them. For one of them's you, and darling, it's true.
She was one of the only people at the time who used to try to keep us all together, keep a group of, you know, stars, as we're called at times. I don't know why they call us stars, but keeping a group of big-name people all together. And she'd have these wonderful parties in the apartment at Kensington. And you could walk into that apartment and there would be Roger Moore, Tommy Steele and Stanley Baker playing a very heavy game of poker in one little room, and away from that there'd be loads of other people. She'd always have a group playing. Shortly after the Beatles became famous, she got them up there.
Alma, you have a reputation for giving all sorts of parties with different decor and odd ideas. Are you planning on doing something spectacular in the near future?
Yes, I've got a fabulous idea for a Christmas party, but I'm not going to tell you about it, Keith, because you're involved in it. You'll have to wait and see.
They knew they could come and just have a great time, or play roulette with my mother, or go and have their fortune told. We used to have a fortune teller in my bedroom, and for £1 they could have their fortune read. And, so I think it was that, just having fun. And you know, as one we had for Tommy Steele, we all dressed up as children, because he doesn't drink. So we had lemonade and sweets and a magician. And then people like Cary Grant sitting on the floor. He didn't wear shorts there.
Alma Cogan's parties were famous. Young John Lennon, old Noel Coward. New singers and vintage stars made it to Kensington. Cogan kept her private life just that. Parties were social and personal. The press and show business colleagues were left to plan her marriages.
Mrs. Cogan? You are Mrs. Cogan, aren't you?
Miss Cogan?
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm ever so sorry. Never mind. Is that through choice, or can't you find anybody? Oh, never mind. Well, you're better off on your own.
It's interesting how obsessed the press was at the time with the fact that she wasn't married and all the explanations that she was forced to give. And they're actually, each explanation, if you read the stories, they're all different. But she's always, oh, yes, I've been proposed to lots of time, but the right man hasn't come along, and so on. Now, what's interesting about the way she talks is that she both says the right man hasn't come along, and of course I want Mr. Right, but also says, well, it's wonderful to live in this new era where women can be bachelor girls and just have a career and be independent. So, in a way, she seems with part of herself to be saying, actually, I'm not interested in all this marriage stuff. What I'm interested in is being a singer, having a career and having a good time.
I never saw her look affectionately at anybody, man or woman. I certainly never saw her touch anybody in any way, ever. All the hours and time we spent working together all those years ago, never at any time did I ever see her make an affectionate gesture to anybody, ever. She was like running a business, you know. I mean, you don't do that. You get on with it. What's the next thing to do? Where do we go from here?
She wouldn't let anything stand in the way of her ambition. I don't mean to say she'd walk over people or anything like that, because far from that. I used to call her Auntie Alma. Everybody used to come to her with if they got any problems, you know. Let's talk it out, Alm, that sort of thing. So she wasn't nasty, but I mean, nothing stood in her way of her ambition. What she wanted to do, and she was going to do it. She did it.
Yes, I've had a love of my own like yours.
By the 60s, pop and rock and rollers had finally shunted a generation of family-oriented balladeers into a siding. Cogan's response to the new wave, since she wasn't going to beat them, was to be greeted by them. The mid-50s, television-watching children were growing up. She was still Big Sister.
Hi, Alma, come on over and say hello. Come on. Say hello.
Is that the way you talk to your guests? Really? You'll have to learn, you know.
She became a part of the past. And because she was over the top visually, the people who controlled these things, had had enough. They didn't want that. And of course, she was then in charge of her affairs to such an extent that she determined what was going to happen. And she was now deciding what she was going to record.
Once, in my big-headed way, I thought I'd written a symphony. It's one of these rather heavy things, and there's quite a lot of melodies in it. And Alma were listening to it, and they said, I love that. I think we could make a song of that. Something like that. It's a long, long time ago, or something like that. And all this thing that was going on, there were little melodies like that all the way through it. Well, Alma heard this, and she went, la, 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 it's a lovely little tune, isn't it? So I said, oh, is it? Yes. La, 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 la. I said, wonder what it's like if we put a rhythm to it. So I said, no, it's a symphony. She said, no, let's put a rhythm to it and see what happens. So we did, and of course the rhythms in those days were the hooligan sort of thing. Suddenly it seemed it could work, you know. She lard it and tiled it and this sort of the other, and then we started to put some words to it. And as a matter of fact, we came up with this thing called Just Once More.
Just once more, let me kiss you just once more. Let me hold you, please, just once more.
Just Once More, Foster and Cogan's response to long hair, blue jeans and Mersey beat was deft, spot on, and didn't make the British top 20. Cover versions were hits abroad. Despite her talent for reinvention, the spirit of the times had gone elsewhere. So she did too, touring a world where 50s Baroque rather than 60s shock was still in vogue. With her usual application, she sang in 6 languages, got hits in many of them, recorded ballads and covered Beatles material. But after more than a decade, television's love affair with her had cooled.
Oh, yeah.
She was such a fantastic television animal, you know. And for some reason, she took to it, and it took to her.
And in a way, it seemed like her life, her only life, was in front of a theatre audience or a television camera. And in a way, when her celebrity was taken away from her in the early 60s, after the Beatles and the Liverpool stuff all happened, she almost stopped living in a fairly kind of essential way. You know, something about her life had kind of seeped out of her. And that being robbed of the television camera and being robbed of large audiences somehow robbed her of a part of herself that she felt she needed to go on existing as this media person.
Nu ska vi dock fortsätta med Alma Cogan. Alma brukar kallas för flickan med skrattet i rösten. Men tyvärr...
Thank you for making me so welcome in your wonderful country. And thank you for making this next song a #1 hit.
Far away, Cogan had homed in on England's answer to the Las Vegas cabaret circuit. Distant but lucrative outposts of old empire, new Europe and emerging Japan. She was probably making more money than in the 50s, but her stardom was no longer specific to Britain. She had become that more nebulous being, an international artiste. Yet the further her light spread, the dimmer it was. In 1966, while touring Sweden, she collapsed on stage and was rushed to hospital. Back in London, the illness was diagnosed as inoperable stomach cancer.
I went to see her and asked her if she... I found out that she was perfectly capable of working and that she was dying. And I gave her a special to do. And I remember going down to see her, and she was, you know, full of sparkle and full of everything. But you could tell that she was, you know, that she was not well. It just seemed such an appalling shame that someone with her amount of life and vitality should be hit by this foul illness.
Let there be wind and occasional rain.
Chili con carne, bubbling champagne.
BBC Two's International Cabaret in autumn 1966 was Alma Cogan's final appearance on the medium she had married in the 50s. She died a month later on October the 26th.
The fact that she died, like lots of other stars died, and in a way was seen to be paying some sort of price, means that she still goes on living, you know, in people's lives, and has taken on this kind of mystique or glamour or aura or whatever, you know, whatever you want to call it. I think people always want to believe that there's an equation that glamour plus success in the end always equals out to some kind of personal unhappiness or tragedy. You know, and she died when she was very young, 34. People feel that their own small lives are in some way compensated for by these large lives. That's the role that celebrities play in post-war life.